So far in this series, every sub-weapon that we've covered has had at least one explicit and unique use case that sets its identity. We've expanded on that basis to explore their potentials to the fullest. Most of the time this will hold true, but the same can't be said for one certain sub in this game. Given the amount of requests I've gotten to cover this one, I know I'm not the only person who thinks this way either. You clicked on this video, so you know that we're talking about Sprinkler. Hello, I'm Pika, a high-level Splatoon coach and competitive player, and it's been a minute, but welcome back to our utility guide series, where we break down the mechanics behind and uses for all the non-bomb sub-weapons in the game, which I believe don't get enough love. This is the 4th episode in this series, so if you've missed any of the previous ones, I'll link the playlist below. Like I said before, Sprinkler is a bit of a strange case, in the sense that it's not immediately obvious what the sub is exactly meant to do. The in-game Sheldon descriptions of weapon kits that have it often reference its pain output as the selling point. As we'll discuss later, this is certainly useful, but at the same time, being able to put turf on the ground is far from any unique quality in a game all about exactly that. To find much use from this thing, we're gonna have to get creative basically right away. But as you'll see, you may just be surprised with how much we can get done with a Sprinkler. To best go about that though, let's go over all the stats and mechanics behind Sprinklers to get a sense of what we're working with. This guide is being made as a Splatoon 3 version 5.1, so it's possible that some of the stats presented here will be adjusted in future updates. If that does happen, I'll note any changes at the top of the description and in the comments. Throwing out a Sprinkler will cost you 60% of your ink tank, making it a little bit cheaper to use than your standard Splat or Suction Bomb. Speaking of Suction Bombs, just like those, Sprinkler will attach to the first piece of terrain that they come in contact with and stay there, at which point they will place a small patch of ink underneath them and begin firing out ink sporadically after a brief half-second wind-up time. This continuous firing of ink is the main mechanic behind Sprinklers, and has a fair bit of depth on its own. The way that Sprinklers fire out ink occurs in 3 stages that depend on how long the Sprinkler has been active for, with the fire rate and range of its shots decreasing each time. The first stage that it starts out with has it firing the fastest and most chaotically, and lasts for the first 8 seconds that the Sprinkler is active. After these 8 seconds pass, the Sprinkler will shift down to stage 2 for the next 15 seconds, which is a bit calmer but still outputs a fair amount of shots. After that time is up though, the Sprinkler enters stage 3, which it remains in indefinitely until the Sprinkler is destroyed, and the paint and range on it is pretty insubstantial at this point. Also, the shots the Sprinkler output will always do 20 damage to anything they touch, regardless of the firing stage or any amount of travel time. Just like with beacons from last time, Sprinklers are also objects, so you need to cover what that means too. Sprinklers can be damaged by opponents, and have 100 HP to get through before they break. Pika from the future here with a correction. The source I normally go to for game stats was actually wrong on this one, and when we were getting clips for this video, we realized the wiki was right and Sprinklers have 120 health, not 100. I mentioned 100 HP again later, so just know it's supposed to be 120 instead. Also quick mention as well to damage multipliers existing for certain weapons against Sprinklers just like with beacons, so some weapons will break it in fewer shots they would normally take to do that much damage. Also like beacons, Object Shredder is effective against Sprinklers and multiplies all damage against them by 10 times, so essentially any source of damage from an Object Shredder user will instantly break one. Sprinklers are also limited in the number you can have out on the field at one time, being quite stingy and maxing out at only 1 Sprinkler per person. If you already have a Sprinkler out and throw a new one, your previous one will immediately break. This restriction makes Inksaver Sub effectively useless to invest into, at least in high amounts, as bringing its use cost underneath 50% is meaningless. Additionally, in an unfortunate property unique to Sprinklers, any Sprinkler you have out on the field will also immediately break when their own user is splatted. Lastly, for stats are the interactions with Sub Power-Up. This ability will increase the duration of both stages 1 and 2, overall increasing the Sprinkler's effective uptime. At the maximum amount of Sub Power-Up equipped, stage 1 will go from its default 8-second duration to 13 seconds, and stage 2 will go from 15 seconds to 17. This will only be helpful in situations where you have a Sprinkler that's both contesting pain output from opponents and that will remain on the field for a long time. We'll get into what those situations can look like soon. And there's our stats for Sprinklers. We have a throwable, destructible object that paints underneath itself, sticks to walls, and can chaotically spam out shots around it. From a brief overview, a throwable sub that paints and damages around itself sounds pretty much like a bomb, except this has some extra steps and limitations. And if you compare them exactly 1-to-1 like that, then you're not necessarily wrong. However, if it really was that simple, then I'd have no point in making this video. Comparing Sprinklers to bombs dismisses a number of unique properties that this subweapon does have, and with a bit of creative thinking, we can really get some mileage out of those. The way I see it, the way to get the most value from your Sprinklers is to establish what you're expecting from your Sprinkler every time you throw one out. I classify Sprinklers into 3 different types. Ones that you expect will be destroyed quickly, ones that you want to last for as long as possible, and ones that it's kind of irrelevant to consider that for at all. We'll start with that last category actually. as some of the more commonly known uses and tricks involving sprinklers, in my opinion, fall underneath this category. When I say this type of sprinkler is irrelevant to consider how long they'll remain out for, there's a couple ways to see that. The most basic kind of sprinkler is one that's so safe that there's no way it'll even get broken by an enemy, instead only being removed when you decide to place a new one later on. These are the sprinklers that you mindlessly place in your spawn as you're swimming into the map after a respawn, just as some free special charge and to save you some time from having to touch up on some corners yourself, especially in Turf War. There are also sprinklers that are the exact opposite, and are placed solely as a movement option due to the immediate paint that sprinklers put where they're attached to terrain. These sprinklers can help optimize movement, especially as a quick way to paint walls or small patches of the ground that would otherwise slow you down. Since these are being used for their immediate patch of turf and nothing else, it typically doesn't matter to the user at that moment if the sprinkler lasts for 1 second or 30, as they're moving away from that spot regardless. These sprinklers are especially appreciated by heavy weapons like Dynamo that would otherwise take a long time to wind up a shot to paint their path instead. Those sprinklers are certainly useful, but it's time to get a bit more interesting, starting with sprinklers that are expected to break quickly. These sprinklers are used reactively and aggressively to start and swing fights in your favor, using the sprinkler as bait or a sacrifice to get the upper hand. The thought of using a sprinkler aggressively may sound strange at first, but it has plenty of properties we can abuse to make it happen. First off, the fact that sprinkler is a throwable object with a hurt box can let it act as a pseudo splash wall. While they're smaller and less durable than splash walls, sprinklers make up for it with their precision and activation time. Splash walls travel slowly and take a bit of time to start up, but sprinklers can tank damage for you immediately, even before they start firing. This makes speccing down a sprinkler between you and your opponent as you start to engage with them a pretty viable strategy, as that extra 100 HP they'll have to chew through before they can even hurt you, assuming you position yourself properly, can be a powerful advantage. As an extension on that, though it's pretty unreliable, sprinkler being able to take damage so immediately also lets it be a damage sponge for you when people are camping your super jump landing. It won't save you from any well-timed bombs or rollers trying to squish you, but it can come up big sometimes. Again, I wouldn't lean too hard into that particular aspect of it, but it's a good trick to have up your sleeve in those dire situations. If you're feeling extra precise with your sprinkler tosses, instead of putting it in front of you as a shield, you can aim for in front of your opponent and use the splash of ink to trap them, similar to a burst bomb. These can still end up tanking some shots for you if the stars align. The intention behind these sprinklers is more geared towards forcing an opponent to engage you, leading to a quicker fight. Still on the topic of sacrificial sprinklers, these can also be useful for gaining information. For example, you can place a sprinkler in the middle of a choke point or on a common flank route that you expect opponents to take, and allow the sprinkler to hold that space for you. While the paint in the area is always appreciated, what we're really looking to achieve with these is gathering information. Since sprinklers never stop firing and outputting ink, any opponent looking to push through that path the sprinkler is on is likely going to have to break that sprinkler before they do so, else they risk getting hit and slowed down by the sprinkler as they go over it. For them to do this though, they're going to have to reveal themselves and make some noise to shoot at it, which greatly increases your odds of noticing them and having time to react accordingly. Similarly, you can also use a sprinkler like this more offensively. When trying to take space from your opponents but you're unsure of where they are, chucking a sprinkler randomly into the opponent's ink may be more effective than you think. While doing that with a bomb gives you one burst of paint and a small chance of getting a random pick, sprinklers are far more persistent. Since sprinklers will keep going and going so long as your opponent lets them, it's unlikely that they'll just stare at that sprinkler and let it keep painting over them. Instead, they'll shoot at it to remove it, which once again provides you with information on their location and makes your retake feel more approachable. Especially given how relatively ink efficient sprinklers are for a throwable sub, given all of these uses, there's very little reason not to throw one out before you step into any potential engagements. Finally, as a bit of a blast to the past, we have long-living sprinklers. These sprinklers are placed in locations that are intentionally as inconvenient for your opponent to reach and destroy them as possible, while also threatening to turf over important areas of the map that pressures the opponent into actually reacting to them. These sprinklers were prevalent back in Splatoon 1, before the turfing stage mechanic was implemented, so sprinklers kept painting well no matter how long they were out for. This was in addition to bomb range up, sub power-up's ancestor, increasing the throwing range of sprinklers, which increased the flexibility in where you could place them. Despite all that was lost though, I believe these types of sprinklers still have more merit than they're given credit for. For these sprinklers to be effective, they need to check a couple of boxes. Primarily again, these sprinklers need to paint over an area of the map that's influential, both to justify yourself going out of the way to set them up, and to convince your opponent that's worth their time to go out of their way to break it. Aside from that, it's all about exploring how we can actually make that sprinkler as inconvenient as possible to break. The two main ways to do this are by utilizing elevation and line of sight. The higher up on a wall or piece of terrain you can manage to place the sprinkler, the harder it gets for opponents to reach it. When placed high enough, many weapons in the game will outright lack the range needed to break it even if they want to. The other way is placing it out of sight of opponents, especially when they're facing towards you. Truly annoying sprinklers will force enemies to turn away from you to break them, slowing them down at minimum, and giving you a chance to catch them off guard and fight them at best. While I still wouldn't recommend it, if you were ever going to use sub power up on sprinklers, these sprinklers should be the justification. A perfect example of sprinklers that do all three of these things are ones placed on the upper rim of the enemy's clam basket while you're pushing them in clam blitz. Keeping turf control under the basket is obviously important to have while you're fighting and moving around there so much during your push, and these sprinklers help with exactly that. On top of that, they're positioned at a high elevation and also out of line of sight of opponents coming from their spawn, forcing them to either waste a lot of time trying to hit the perfect fallout shot to break it, or more realistically having to push forward for their defense and dealing with you and the sprinklers simultaneously from two different angles. After all that, perhaps now you're with me in seeing how flexible sprinklers can be. In a way, they're essentially an extra teammate you can throw out to do your bidding in whatever situation you're in. Wish you had a teammate in front of you could use as bait to win a fight off of? Sprinklers can be that teammate for you. Riding on tower and tower control and need a meat shield in front of you to help squeak out a few more points? Sprinkler can be that too. The list goes on. And while Sprinkler will rarely do any one thing on its own, they could be incredible enablers for their user, and I believe that's why it's currently tied for the most common sub in the game at 10 weapon kits. It doesn't matter what role you're playing, having an extra body to play around can always be helpful. With how open-ended the sub can be, I'm sure I missed some tricks, so feel free to share any that you like to use down in the comments. People who saw my tweet a couple months back might remember me mentioning how I've really come around on the sub recently, and exploring creative uses like this is exactly why. With that said, the best advice I can give for using this thing is to just try stuff with it, because you never know what situation it just might end up being useful in. That's the end of the guide. I'm gonna do a bit of rambling now because it has been a minute, and probably some people are wondering what's going on. First of all, college has been keeping me incredibly busy. This semester's been a lot more work than I thought it would be, so I haven't really been able to make anything for a bit, but it's nice to be back for now. The big thing I want to mention though, many people following us on Twitter probably already saw this, but because it is a big part of what I have been doing on content as of late, I want to share here as well that the team I've been playing for in competitive Splatoon for the last 2 years now, Cherry Limeade, has disbanded. I'll leave a link to our page down below so you can check out the post if by any chance you missed that and are interested in it. There's no big drama, so basically we just aren't really feeling fit to compete with each other anymore, don't really want to play under the team name anymore with so many things that have changed. You'll still see us hanging out, but we really won't be playing many tournaments anymore, and it's highly unlikely I'll be recording those and posting them here. I imagine most people probably don't even know what I'm talking about, but I still wanted to mention it here because especially with some of my content about a year ago, half a year ago, a lot of those tournament sets, those VODs and stuff like that, I know people have really appreciated watching them and have been very supportive of the team and have said that they've really learned a lot from that stuff. So I'm happy we got to share it while we can, and thank y'all again for all that support over all that time. Another reason I wanted to bring that up though is that I don't really mention it much, but there is a playlist on this channel of a bunch of VODs of our team playing in scrims and tournaments and stuff like that I do leave visible. It has a bunch of unlisted recordings just so those don't get spammed in your inbox with low quality, but for people who do look for those VODs, that playlist does exist. It is where someone can watch a lot of my gameplay and a lot of the gameplay of the team. But obviously now if the team is disbanded, we're not really going to be adding to that playlist anymore because we're not really going to be playing together, especially not that competitively. So that actually leads me to a question. Since I won't be adding new VODs to that playlist anymore, what would the interest be in maybe me making a second channel for VODs? I still want to be able to provide recordings of my gameplay for people that are looking for it, but I don't really want to post that here just publicly because it's not really very well edited and refined like I like to have most of my content here. So perhaps a second channel would be a place that I could just dump those recordings unedited long form for people that are looking for it and make my life easier and also make it easier for y'all to find in some hidden playlists. So let me know what you think about that if you're interested. Other than that, hopefully this video wasn't too scuffed. Right as I sat down to record the voiceover for the script, turned out Audacity broke on me and just wouldn't record from my mic in particular, but it was fine with every other device. So I had to download a whole new program, learn it, record it all in one session so I could get this out in time because I really want to have it out before the new season hits. So I feel like I've learned it and made it work well enough, but hopefully it wasn't too bad. Anyways, as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.